the alumni lecture series that effectively has come about and put some of these things up. But if you say something that you don't want to get out, we can delete it.
No, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Okay, so we always start a little late, and I'm going to send one more reminder. And I was smart because I sent a reminder at 3:45, and I said this will be the second to last reminder. So,
all right.
There should be a couple more astronomy students coming in because Joe mentioned it at the end of class. I almost forgot, but
yeah, their professor holds them over late all the time, though. So
yeah,
we
were talking about supernova shockwaves and 1950s Soviet papers on set of blast solutions that ended up telling American astronomers how large the first hydrogen bombs would be.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I got to spend some time over working with the Soviets. They're doing nuclear missile inspections several years, so fun.
Uh-huh.
My wife says I'm the only American that actually got sent to Siberia.
But you're
there are a
not.
bunch of us.
All right. Well, okay, gang. Thanks for joining, and and I hope you guys are surviving your semester okay. I know it's been a long road, and I want to thank the students who attended. Again, Dr. French notices, and I also notice those who attend my general physics, so that's good. We have with us today Mr. Richard, is it Chopa? Chapa, okay. Yep. Richard Chapa, who is recently retired from Boeing and has a distinguished career, I think, in the field that I'm calling strategic deterrence. That might be a 1980s term, but both from the side of what was the expression? Trust but verify, and also managing engineers in the effort, strategic deterrence effort. So, Mr. Chapa is an 83 SUNY Oneonta grad.
That's correct.
I forgot, was your degree history or political?
Yeah, European history with a minor in political science. So cool. Basically STEM, right? Science, political science.
Okay, well, you have the floor. I don't know, do you have something you want to share?
Well, I sent out the one chart that kind of lists most of the programs that I worked on, except the classified ones. So as long as the guys have those, I'll talk briefly about those.
Okay.
Not each one of them, just in general, in case they have questions.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can put that up at any time.
Sure.
And I can also put it in the chat. I distributed it yesterday, but
yeah, I don't need it, but if anyone wants to refer to it. So to the students, 40 years ago, I was just like you, a sophomore at Oneonta, sitting in class, pondering what the heck I was going to do when I got done with college. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about my career. I'm going to talk about the aerospace and defense market because I've got almost 40 years working in that sphere. The professor sent out a a page that shows most of the programs that I've worked upon. So if you have any questions on those, I'll save that for Q&A. Then I'm going to talk about internships and co-ops. I'm going to talk about the kind of degrees that come into engineering, because it's not just engineering degrees. I'll talk about a little bit about program management, and then I'll open it up for questions. So if that's okay, I'll get started. So
thank you.
Good. So I started out. So how did I get where I ended up? So I started out as a political scientist. Actually, I started out in pre-med, and then I flunked calculus my first semester. Yeah. And after that, it was, when you get an F in a 4-credit calculus course, it's a hard road to get back to that. But I decided I became politically active while at college, like I'm sure many of you. I got an internship my last semester senior year with my senator, Al D'Amato from Long Island, who was the New York State senator at the time. And I went down to Washington, and that turned into a job offer. So I got to work as a legislative aide doing foreign affairs and defense. And while I was doing that, I got a chance to see the military in action. And I kind of fell in love with that. And one day I got fed up with the politics of it all, because even though we're all idealists at 18, 19, 20, 21, when you see the ugly face of how politics really is in Washington, D.C., So I walked down the street and enlisted in the Army to go be an Army Ranger. I spent about 10 years as a Ranger and a paratrooper with a bunch of overseas tours and combat tours. And then the Army taught me Russian, sent me off to Russian because I had some language ability. And then I spent 10 years in the former Soviet Union doing various jobs as a defense attaché, doing intelligence collection, as a nuclear missile inspector, X-raying Russian intermediate range ballistic missiles as they came out of the factory at Votkinsk, and counting warheads over Russian nuclear silos out in Siberia. When I was in the Pentagon on 9/11, and then after a short time in Afghanistan, I came back and decided, 3 combat tours was enough, and I wanted to be home for my family. And I got a job opportunity at Boeing. And the reason they hired me was because I had big nuclear missile big missile experience, silo-based missile experience from my time on the job training, OJT, in the Army. And I also spoke Russian, and I was managing contracts with Russian and Ukrainian engineering basically rocket manufacturers. So I ended up transitioning to Boeing, retiring from the Army and coming into Boeing as a program manager. And so, one thing to keep in mind for those of you who, of any degree, is that anyone can be a program manager. You just have to be able to, stick to a budget, follow a schedule, and be able to manage people who are doing technical work. So I was a program manager for a couple years, doing international programs all around the world, on every continent except Africa and Antarctica. And then I got a job offer to be the head of international business development, and I jumped into business development because it was an executive job. Then I spent about 15 years as an executive at Boeing in those doing global marketing and sales, selling basically everything you see on that sheet, helping in the development, the research and development, and the eventual sales to U.S. and foreign companies and governments. And then my last couple years, I went back to program management, and I was the program director for intercontinental ballistic missiles for Boeing, managing maintenance of the Minuteman System that's on guard in 450 silos out in the west, guarding the United States. So if you ever get a chance to watch a airplane fly, to see a laser shoot down a missile, to watch an ICBM leave the silo and launch 6,000 miles away, you'll totally be hooked on aerospace. So the aerospace and defense market is pretty interesting if you think about it. You can there's everything from the R&D on emerging technologies all the way up through production of the items in the factory to training of the operators out in the field. And so there's a spectrum of jobs out there that anybody can apply to, irrespective of what your degree is in. So if you want an engineering job, in general, most of the aerospace and defense market will hire engineers who have degrees in engineering, physics, chemistry, mathematics, a lot of the astro sciences, especially in the aerospace side. For program management or for supplier management, basically any degree. They do like to see business degrees or some business courses, and I'm always a proponent of business courses because I'm self-taught, and because my as I tell my kids, I don't care what you guys want to go to school for, you have to monetize it. You have to be able to make money at whatever your passion is. Being able to monetize it is always a good thing. One of the great things about working at a company like Boeing is there's lots of opportunity, right? So even though I started out in the missile defense side, I started out in missile defense and spent most of my time in weapons. I got a chance to work with the big airplane people as we were putting laser weapons on commercial aircraft, on 747s, on C-130s. I got a chance to work with our folks who were working on intelligence systems on some of the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft that flew over Afghanistan and Iraq that were tracking people's cell phones, terrorist cell phones and things like that. I got a chance to work with the satellite folks because, interestingly enough, the launching a satellite into orbit is like putting up a ballistic missile, and many of the an incoming ballistic missile, in space is just a satellite moving in orbit, right? Just at a very fast speed. And so being able to hit that bullet with a bullet is a pretty incredible physics experiment. Let's see. I guess that's really what I wanted. It's about 15 minutes in. That's been my career. I'm happy to open it up to questions, or I can talk a little bit more about some of the programs I've worked on. I would recommend to you that you jot this down, rich.chapa@gmail.com. I work with a lot of groups that help mentor kids, anyone younger than 60 trying to get into aerospace and defense. But it's kind of a passion of mine. So I work with Helping Our Heroes Foundation, Wounded Warrior Project, and others. But I'm more than happy to help out my alma mater of SUNY Oneonta if any of you folks want to learn more or have questions about how to get into the aerospace and defense market. Oh, one more thing on my list. So a lot of the companies in aerospace and defense do have internships and co-ops. They're all paid, and they pay them as an entry-level engineer. So you can make a ton of money if you decide that you want to apply for one of these internships. They are what we call an evergreen requisition, so that they put up a requisition. There's no real closing date on it. It's just kind of a generic associate engineer or associate program manager, and it's an entry-level position. They bring you in usually for the summer. You'll come work in a Boeing facility, either doing research, building, engineering flow charts, doing experiments, working on the factory floor on quality engineering and things like that. And so that's for the summer. Co-ops are during a semester, and those usually will take place if you come in and intern the summer of your junior year. They will offer you a co-op of your senior year, and they'll pay for your school, and then they'll have a job waiting for you when you get out. And so that's a great way. It's not only Boeing that does this. Lockheed, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, most of the big aerospace and defense primes do this very same thing. So if you go to a place like www.boeing/careers and look up internships and co-ops, They'll give you a raft of areas of different kinds of work you can do based on the kind of degree. And what I always say is, even if if you're a mathematics major and you're saying, oh, I don't know if I could do electrical engineering, hey, it doesn't cost you anything to apply, and you might get selected. So, roll the dice, take the chance. You never know what might come of it. The last thing I'll talk to is GPA. Okay, so most of the big primes are pretty selective. Okay, they usually pick folks whose GPAs are like 3.5 and up. That doesn't mean that a 2.69 GPA in European history from Oneonta State cannot get a job and become an executive in the Boeing company. It just means that it's more difficult. It's a more difficult route, and you got to do something in between to prove yourself. I can tell you, reflecting now, I have my own company. I consult to, a bunch of small, mid-level, and small defense companies. A lot of them work with Boeing. I still consult to Boeing on occasion. It has been a very remarkable time for me. It's been a remarkable career. I love the products I've had a chance to work on. I think that I'm building world peace every day by defending ours and defending the democratic way of life. And open to any questions you guys might have.
I was kind of curious about the PAC-3.
Yeah.
Because I heard those are, because they take out like things like cruise missiles and ballistics.
Correct.
So I was just wondering about like what you did for that project for that one.
Mm-hmm. So PAC-3 is the terminal missile defense stage. What that means is, as you take a look at a missile, an inbound missile, it comes along on a ballistic trajectory, or on a cruise missile, it can come floating in, or even for an air breather, those will shoot down. Patriots will shoot down aircraft too. I was actually I was the head of sales for the integrated air and missile defense portion of Boeing for a while. So my job was working with Lockheed Martin, which is the prime contractor. Boeing actually makes the seeker, so the brains of it. So it's basically a RF seeker on a gyro that spins around, that will sit there, and it will identify what the target is and make sure that the missile adjusts to hit that target, so that you have a hit to kill, which is basically hitting a bullet with a bullet. PAC-3 is manufactured right here in Huntsville, Alabama, and it's the mainstay of the Army's terminal missile defense for short-range missiles. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So you kind of like oversee them, or you part of like kind of helped kind of design and stuff, or?
No. So I'm not an engineer. I'm not an engineer. What I did on PAC-3 as part of my job when I was working on special projects was, my job was to look at the PAC-3 factory and look at organizational efficiencies of how we could get the Army recently hired Boeing to go from 350 PAC-3 seekers per year to 1,000, right? So almost a 3x improvement within the existing factory space. And so I led the team that went through, looked at our, how the assembly line was laid out, looked at what efficiencies we could get, looked at how we could cut down the cycle time, because we had certain areas where in the manufacturing process, the operations people are moving a seeker through it in the build, and the engineers would come in and check. And my job was to figure out how can we mechanize that so it doesn't require, as many engineers, so that perhaps that engineering piece could be done by a technician, right? Of course, designed by an engineer. All of the process is designed by engineers, but could be done by a technician on the assembly line, rather than having to wait for engineers to come in. So how could we move the line faster, streamline the processes so that we could get more through per month and meet the government's goal of 1,000 per month, or 1,000 per year?
All right, thank you.
Richard, were you often in the I'll hold my question. Daniel wants to know what is the Minuteman weapon system about?
Okay, so let's just talk about strategic deterrence for a second. Okay, so after World War II, right, at the end of World War II, the United States dropped 2 atom bombs on Japan, right, opened up a new horrible weapon system, and then there was a race for the atom. So in 1949, actually on my birthday, August 29th, 1949, the Russians exploded their first bomb, mainly through espionage, right? They had infiltrated the Manhattan Project. And then there was a race because the United States and Russia had captured Nazi scientists and brought them, rocket scientists, the ones who were responsible for the V1s and V2s that were used against England. The United States captured the guidance, mostly the guidance folks under Wernher von Braun, and the Russians or the Soviets captured the propulsion folks who designed the rocket motors. And it's interesting, to this day, Russian rocket motors are the standard. And if you look at Russian missile design, Russian missiles are really huge missiles, but not very good accuracy, whereas U.S. nuclear missiles are smaller missiles, but with excellent accuracy, so that you can hit within a very small CEP, circular error of probability. So the Minuteman system was designed by the Boeing company to be the answer to this race to develop rocket systems once they discovered that strategic bombers were almost obsolete due to anti-air defense systems around Moscow. And so the Russians took the German scientists and developed huge rockets, and the U.S. took the German scientists and developed smaller rockets with great guidance systems. And then the space race came, and we determined that having a nuclear missiles on alert 24/7, 365 on a hair trigger would be the strategic deterrence that would basically mutually assured destruction. And so my view, mutually assured destruction is a morally bankrupt, but it is the system that the United States and Russia came to terms with. And if you think about it, you know, there's a lot of people who don't like nuclear weapons, who say nuclear weapons are wrong, but you know, nuclear weapons have not been used since 1945. And if you look at the death rate due to war since 1945, prior to 1945, the death rate, I believe, was over 3% of the population. And since that time, it's been below 0.1% of the population. So strategic deterrence has worked in terms of keeping the world safe and preventing global conventional war. So that's a long entry into, so Boeing designed the Minuteman system. In 1962, we started fielding that system at bases in Montana, North Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado. They used to be all over, but that's where they are now. And since that time, those systems have been on alert. They've been upgraded, and they are on alert 24/7 to this day, with, you know, operators sitting on the consoles, making sure that there's no launches against us. And if they are, so basically they're deterring other countries that may not have as many, with that mutually assured destruction. Did that answer your question?
He's typing.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
yep.
Okay. So my last job, I was the program manager for all of that. Boeing is we maintain all of the guidance systems. We maintain the, to make sure that that's the most important part, is to make sure the guidance systems, that the missile will go to where it's supposed to go. That's circular error probability. So
it seems to me that, and by the way, anyone can type questions in the chat, or unmute yourself and speak up. As you all know, I will talk the whole time if you don't. But so as a program manager, for the Minuteman, Boeing's portion of that and the guidance systems, that must be a stressful position to be in.
Yeah. So
did you ever fear at some point in time that they were close to use?
No.
No.
And in all honesty, I was part of on-site inspection agency back in the 90s as a nuclear inspector in Russia. So I would fly into Russia. I'd work with my Russian counterparts and Ukrainian counterparts, Soviet, and go to their different missile fields and to their factories. And then it was interesting because I never felt like we were on the verge of nuclear war because everybody knew that it would be so horrific that, but basically it kind of kept the balance of, two guns pointing at each other. It was interesting after I left the military and I came to Boeing, and I was, as I said, I was working Russian, Ukraine engineering contracts. So we were working on with the Ukrainian, my counterpart on the Ukrainian side from when I was a missile inspector back in the military was now the general director of the rocket factory that I was negotiating with as we went over to purchase Ukrainian rockets to fire targets against our missile defense system. So it's a small world. I'm friends with all those folks that were, our enemies back in the Cold War. It's just kind of interesting.
Do you think we're in a Cold War era again now?
I don't think that we're in a Cold War era. I think that the Russians are, having spent a large portion of my life dealing with the Russians. The Russians as a people are just like us. They just didn't go through, they didn't go through the rights of man, the Renaissance, and they didn't have that whole rights of man that we have in the West. And so they kind of grew up in a very I don't even know how to describe it. It's not right to call it a kleptocracy, but it's President Putin is saying things for his own domestic political consumption, just as our president is saying things for our domestic political consumption. And so politics plays a role. Putin is the most loved guy over there, depending on if you listen to state-run media, if you talk to the people on the street. But I don't think that we're at the edge of going to war with them. They're going to push as far as they can, especially in eastern Ukraine, because they want to keep us off balance. They want to keep the West fighting amongst itself, right? Nord Stream 2 pipeline coming through the Baltic. It's the same issue. Separate Germany from the rest of Europe and keep everybody arguing amongst themselves so they don't focus on Russia.
That's a gas pipeline.
Yeah, that's the undersea gas pipeline that will bypass. Right now, the Ukrainians can turn off the gas coming, through Ukraine to get to Western Europe.
Got it.
And the Russians don't want that. They don't want to give Ukraine any of that. And when I was the defense attaché in Moldova, which is between Ukraine and Romania, and we also got our gas from that pipeline, the Russians turned off the gas pipeline in the middle of winter, and we froze. For politics. So yeah, it's a tool, a useful tool.
In your management of various systems, were you in the position to hire engineers?
Absolutely.
Yep.
I hired a lot of engineers. So let me tell you, everyone's looking for experience, right? First, if you're an entry-level guy, they're looking for your GPA and experience. So if you've got a great GPA, you probably get a job. If you've got some experience out there during internships, you can probably get a job. If you don't have either, it's going to be more difficult. You may have to start at smaller companies, but you can totally work yourself up there through hard work. I always tell my folks, you got to add value every day. You got to focus on fixing the problem. You got to help others. And if you do those things, then, you're going to be a success no matter where you are. You know, just as you go into, and when you think about an interview process, remember it's a sales pitch. You're selling yourself to that company. And so, you know, you need to come up with what are the top 3 reasons why they should hire you, and then why they should, with all of the other qualified applicants, what sets you apart from all those other schmoes. And, that's what you have to do. So think of it as a sales pitch. And, one of the biggest mistakes I've always seen is people write their resume and then they think once I've got the resume, it's like carved in stone, like the 10 Commandments. It's like, no, this is a living document that you rewrite for every job requisition, and you write it to the job rec, because in today's world, the recruiters who are out there recruiting put buzzwords into the job rec that if they don't find those in whatever algorithm they're using, they run your resume through that. If those buzzwords don't pop up, guess what? You don't get selected for an interview. So, and then go kill the interview. Be confident, right? Confidence. I got this. I can handle it, right?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than an interview when you don't feel good going in.
Right.
And nothing better than, good interviews are good, but it's
read the job description, know the job description inside and out, what they want, why you got it, and then kill it.
A lot of the students who are actually here on the list may not yet have had internships, but they have distinguished themselves locally in research projects. Is this something that they should be putting out there as their?
Absolutely. It's the experience in doing that kind of work that companies are looking for, right? Otherwise, you're just a blank sheet, right? But if you've actually been out and had your hands on, whether it's on research, whether it's working, on a project or leading a project, right? I mean, think about it. Those leadership positions as a team leader or leading a project, those are the things that get you into engineering management or into program management downstream. Those are all things you can use and build on those, not just on your resume, but when you're in the interview process, talk about that, right? Talk about what you've done. Those are the things. The first question in any interview is going to be, tell me about any education, training, or certification experience that you've had that makes you qualified for this job. That'll be the first question that they ask you, right? And so they'll be looking at your resume, but it's your, all those little things that aren't in the resume that talk about your mother story of why they should hire you. That's what needs to get brought out. When I worked on this research project, I did this. Here was the situation. Here's the actions that I took, and here was the result. And that's how they want to see it.
Joseph, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Do you feel like your background and your experience through the military kind of gave you that competitive edge or credentials that these large defense contractors may be looking for when they're hiring people?
So yes, I mean, for me, because I didn't have a technical degree, but for the most of you guys, you do have technical degrees. And if you don't want to, the reason I went into the military was because I fell in love with that. I wanted to go be an Army Ranger more than anything. I saw that and was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And that's a great thing to do in your 20s. Thank God I was able to pass the language aptitude test, and they picked me to study Russian, because really that second part of my career, speaking Russian, doing the technical inspections in Russia, right? Going through the solid rocket motor course out at Thiokol out in Utah, where I had to learn that, translating for nuclear missile inspections, right? Having to understand the technical aspects of it so that I could translate it. Because there's nothing worse if you don't know the technical aspects to, get a technical word that you have to translate into Russian. And so that was really, for me, was that little bit of technical knowledge was what got, and experience is what got me that first look into Boeing. So yeah, it's not a requirement, I guess is my point. Most of the people at Boeing are not veterans.
Okay, thank you.
Joseph, I've forgotten your background. Do you have a military background? And you don't have to say.
No, I don't. The reason I asked is that I'm particularly interested in taking my talents maybe to the Air Force after I graduate and working technically with them, and
They have a
then
great program.
seeing where that could take me, post-service.
They have a great engineering program in the Air Force, and so if you'd like to talk about that, I can talk to you about that offline.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yep.
What was doing inspections in the Soviet Union like? You've shared a little bit of that, but how many trips did you make? Were they in remote areas? You said you were going to factories. What were you looking for?
So my first tour doing this, I was a start inspection team chief at the United States monitoring facility at Votkinsk, Russia. And at Votkinsk, they have the Votkinsk machine building factory, which is where they built the SS-20 intermediate range nuclear missile, which was prohibited under the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. So the United States, at the front gate of that factory, had a site, a little compound where we owned the control of the entry gate into the factory, and then any vehicle that came out of the factory that was of the size that could hold a prohibited missile, we were allowed to inspect. And if we wanted further, we could bring it to a cargo scan, which was a huge X-ray machine, and we would run it through the X-ray machine to look for the distinguishing features on that missile that would tell us whether that was an SS-20 or not. And so we would we'd fly in and we have to fly through the Ministry of Defense in Moscow and then out to Votkinsk, which is again in the Ural Mountains. And there was 30 Americans allowed on site, usually 2 military folks, a team chief and a deputy team chief, and 28 civilians. And we would be in country for 2 months and then out of country for 2 months and then back in country for 2 months and out of country. And then twice a day, we were allowed to inspect the perimeter of the factory. The rest of the time, we were required to stay in our little compound, and we would be escorted by the Russians. So in the summertime, it would be walking or biking on bike, and in the wintertime, on cross-country skis. And so they became death matches, basically, between the U.S. and the Soviets, who was going to be the best. So it was quite fascinating. But we were all friends, and as an interesting side, once a year we would get together with the Russian minders who were our monitors, and we would sit together and watch Dr. Strangelove and drink vodka and laugh our butts off.
Okay, that's not how I expected that to end. But yeah, interesting. How many other places were there like this that U.S. had access to?
That was the main base in Russia. There was also the main factory in Russia. The main factory in Ukraine was at Pavlograd. And Pavlograd, those were the folks that when I was in Ukraine doing the missile negotiations, the general director of that factory was my old minder when I was when I was an inspector. Those were the 2 main factories for the intermediate range missiles. And then I got a chance to do RVOSIs, reentry vehicle on-site inspections, where you fly in through the gateway at Ulan-Ude out in Inner Mongolia, and then you transfer from there onto a Russian plane and fly in. You pick one of their missile sites. You fly into the site. Once you're at the site, you tell them which silos you want to pick, and they have I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think they have an hour to go pop the top of the silo, remove the shroud over the reentry vehicles, and then they can, they can put shrouding around the guidance and any of the countermeasures, but they have to be, the reentry vehicles have to be seen, and we would go in and count and make sure that there were the appropriate number of reentry vehicles. So like on an SS-18, which is the largest, you would be looking at 11 3-meter tall nuclear warheads.
So the reentry vehicles are the delivery system for these.
That's correct.
And I'm trying to think, and Josh or Valerie might know, but do they have the same heating concerns and heat shield concerns of, say, we always talk about the returning lunar vehicles,
Sure.
Entering. Is it the same sort of issue?
Absolutely. Reentry's tough. You can, if you go to any, like the Space and Space and Rocket Center here in Huntsville, Alabama, you can see the reentry or the vehicles, space vehicles that have returned from space, and you can see the burn on the ablative materials that were on the bottom of those. That's on anything coming back from space. If you look at one of the biggest problems in hypersonics weapons now, that's the new buzzword for everybody. But what kind of composites, what kind of ablative materials are you going to have on those kind of vehicles at those speeds, right? Because at those speeds, any little thing can cause a catastrophe. So that's the fascinating part of being in this industry, is you get to think all those those cool things, how to shoot a boosting missile with a laser, how to bounce lasers in space, how to design new ablative materials for hypersonics, right? How do you do guidance on something like that? So it's really fascinating.
Yeah, the delta V though for a suborbital weapon though would be less than for a lunar mission. Yeah.
But anything that's going in space and re-entering, right. And if you think about how the launch design for a hypersonic weapon, a lot of times they will go up into space and then come back down before they start their maneuvering. Mm-hmm. Mostly MARV kind of vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm wondering, I have one more question left, but do any of the, Tim, okay.
Hi, and for the students who are jumping in, I'm Tim Hayes, and I work with the Alumni Relations Group. So it's been my pleasure to talk with Rich over a few years and finally bring him to campus, even if he's not actually on campus. But I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience at Oneonta. I mean, even from the survival of snow in the winter, learning how to cross-country ski, things like that. But what types of experiences did you have that sort of served as a foundation? Because you're doing amazing things and going to Russia and being in situations where you have no real background experience. How do you translate those skills that you learn as an undergrad and build on them going forward?
So, the first thing, I guess, is the academic aspects of it. And, I was able to, my last couple semesters at Oneonta, have exceptionally good grades. I learned after my first semester that, getting good grades and having your head in the game in class, I mean, this is a job, right? So part of it also for me, I worked at the Copper Fox from, my freshman year through my senior year. On the weekends, which kind of kept my partying down to I was still part of the party, but I was not in it. I worked, and so it kind of kept me, it made me understand, when you're tired, that you really have to budget your time, and you have to make sure that you do give appropriate time to studying, and that, and I think also for me being a history major, the research, right? Because if you don't know something about a job, for example, when I first came into missile defense systems, I knew nothing about missile defense, but I sure as heck knew how to, do research, in the Pentagon Library or online or however, so that I could dig in and figure it out. So I knew enough to interview and then to work in that realm. The last thing I'll say is the friendships. You know, I started out in FIPI. That's where I was my freshman year in a triple, which was packed. You know, 3 6-foot guys jammed in a little room on a hall. It was horrible. I moved there to Blodgett Hall to a suite, which was a lot nicer. And then I eventually moved downtown. Lived in my fraternity house. I was ITK brother, and then I lived in I can't remember which apartments they were. There was a series of apartments up on the hill for a year. But the friendships that I've made, right? I have lifelong friends. I still get together with my friends from Oneonta. It's been, you know, I mean, I graduated in '83. You know, I started in 1979, right? When, you know, it's like bell bottoms were still cool. And you know, those friends that I still have, I keep touch with. We have a running, with some of my fraternity brothers, we have kind of a running, you know, text stream that's been going on for years. And we get together, you know, twice a year, once to go skiing. And one time we go down to, you know, New Orleans or Austin. You know, I took him to the World War II Museum last year. You know, we walked through the museum and you know, and then we watched the playoffs and drank some beer, you know. And so having friends that you can get back together with, you know, your friends you make in college are the friends that you'll keep for life. So, you know, that teamwork of everybody work, you know, we all help each other. We help each other with jobs. You know, one of the guys is a mergers and acquisition guy. I've pulled him in on a couple projects that I've worked with other defense companies. You know, it's helping, it's your network. So, you know, hang on to your friends.
You said you recommended taking a business course.
Absolutely.
And we've had a lot of people. We've had a lot of people who've recommended that before. What type of business course? Oh, sorry, Josh. No,
Josh's question.
Yeah, so I just had a question about the mutual inspection regime, because over the last few years, the U.S. has been pulling out of some treaties, and
Right.
it also seems that a number of programs like overflights and mutual inspections might be sort of on the wane, right?
Yeah, I flew on a couple open skies on the Ukrainian and Russian aircraft.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so I was wondering, are there any prospects for warming relationships and cooling tensions rather than the reverse?
Well, you know, I think with the Biden administration, so most of my, you know, I grew up in the military doing arms control, right? In the Russia sphere, that's where I grew up, right? Doing arms control. That is almost, I would say, a tenet of the Biden administration, because they brought in a bunch of the old arms control folks. I think arms control is great as long as everybody abides by the arms control treaty. If you remember, the reason that they pulled out of the INF treaty and was because of Russian cheating, right? And bringing in different kind of cruise missiles. So, you know, arms control treaties have to, you know, they serve their purpose, I would say. I don't think they're a be-all, end-all. I think that as long as both sides are willing to abide by the terms of the treaty, but there needs to be, you know, like Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. I think was the heart of the inspection regime, and as long as you can do that, I think arms control is a useful tool. But just arms control for the sake of arms control is not.
Yeah, thank you.
Daniel's going to have a question, I think, here. And probably maybe, but while Daniel's typing, so is there a particular business course or just anything that gets you thinking about budgets and basic market effects, et cetera?
Yeah. So to me, it's the, you know, you have to understand, there's no such thing in as research for research's sake. Research has to be for something, right? And as those of you who have applied for grants before understand, there's always somebody who has money who's got to be willing to pay for that. And so understanding the market dynamics, supply and demand, right? If you decide that I want to build a product, it can be a very high-end product, like something in hypersonics that's pie in the sky, or like a laser weapon, right? We're gonna put a megawatt laser on an airplane and fly it around. Or you can go for the low end, right? Where you can say, well, everybody's going to have this, and so we can go in there and compete on price, but you have to have economies of scale. So it's the more the fundamentals of how markets work rather than, I mean, I don't even like doing spreadsheets. I hate, going through and balancing a checkbook. My wife is laughing over on the side here. But understanding, what can drive a market, what supply and demand, those are the kind of things that are useful. So having a couple business management, a business management course, maybe marketing, because you gotta, like an interview is you selling yourself, right? So fundamentals of marketing might not be a bad thing either. But you don't go hog wild on it, but just enough so you can talk the talk. Because I can tell you, having had some amazing PhD engineers work for me, or PhD physicists. These are the guys who design the algorithms for how a missile will shoot down a missile in space at 25,000 miles an hour. And if you think about that, it's incredible that they can do that. But they got to be able to tell the story to get the grant, or to convince a guy like me who has all the new business funds, right? I was the guy who funded all of that. So they had to convince me that what they were doing was going to lead to us being able to make money, right? Or provide a product that the United States government would want to buy. So it's called building the business case. So understanding how to do a business case is critically important, I think, for everybody.
Daniel wants to know how it was learning Russian.
So I went through the Defense Language Institute through the Army, and they do immersion training. So you show up the first day, and the professor who's from Russia starts speaking to you in Russian, and there's writing it on the board, and then the translation next to it, so that all you're hearing, right, every day you're hearing Russian, and eventually you start to pick it up, and everything is focused on conversational. So that's beginning Russian. So I think that's a great way to learn it. Another is through a summer abroad program. Having a bunch of friends, or a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, that you can speak. The key is every day, right? You got to put the English aside, and you got to. I never felt that I owned Russian until I was stationed as the head of the liaison team with the Russian peacekeeping forces in Bosnia, and so I was the head of the group, and I slept, ate, drank, went on patrol with the Russians. And it was funny, my wife, when I came back, she said I would be dreaming at night and speaking in Russian. I would wake up and say something in Russian to her. So I never felt like I owned the language until that point, but that's the way to do it, in my opinion. Plus, go to Italy, learn Italian.
Where was is that Monterey, where the language?
Monterey, yep, Monterey, California.
Okay.
So every day you get to wake up and look at the Pacific Ocean, get to study your languages and go do it. Yeah. You can join a Army Reserve, or a Air Force, or I guess it's Army or Navy Reserve linguist battalions. They have them, and you can go learn the language as part of your reserve. You don't have to be an active duty person. You commit to a reserve time.
My brother's father-in-law was an instructor there.
Oh, wow.
Korean.
Nice.
Yep. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for Mr. Chapa? Well, in that case, we'd like to thank you for joining us. It's been exceptional to listen to, and quite different from what we're normally used to. However, a lot of your message was the same. Apply, prepare. Don't let your degree determine exactly who you are. We've had a lot of that message come from alumni coming back.
That's the ante, right? That's the sheepskin that gets you in the game. And then once you're in the game, it's how you play your cards. And, if you want to go do something, you don't need to, necessarily have to go get the next degree. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go get it, but you can do a lot of things just with the basic. I mean, I have a master's in Russian. I have a undergrad in European history. Never had a business course. So I'm just telling you, as I was sitting there trying to figure out profit and loss, it would have been a heck of a lot easier for me if I had that. It has been a pleasure for me. I love Oneonta. I had some of the best years of my life at Oneonta. I've made lifelong friends that to this day, I get together with, and so enjoy your time there. Do great things. Pay attention to scholastics. Go to the Copper Fox. Enjoy. And
it still exists, doesn't it?
It does. Just knew Pete, the old owner, is a friend of mine. He died last year, so 2 years ago. But yeah, it's well, I'll be back. So Alumni Weekend next year is the 55th anniversary of ITK's founding. The brothers will be back in singing the brothers song at the Copper Fox. So come join us, all of you who are of age.
Well, hopefully we're back by then too.
We will be
that way. It's a little quiet here now.
Yeah.
Beautiful, but quiet.
Right. Well, thank you all for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And if I can help any of your students, if you have any questions on interviewing, writing a resume, aerospace and defense.
Well, I have your email.
Yeah, send it out.
You professed it, so I'm happy to send it out there. And I think there are people would like to boost our internship and how to go about doing that for some students and how to get more opportunities. I think is something we're working on.
Wow, I'd be happy to help in any way I can.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tim, too. Yep. All right. All right. And thank you all who attended. Thank you all the students who were here. All right. Have a great evening.